Hello everyone. Today we have Ninder Johal with us. He started in the music industry and built one of the most recognized British Asian music labels before the digital shift changed everything. He then pivoted into major business events across the UK, including the Signature Awards, which now run multiple cities. So during COVID, you told me last time, Ninder, you launched the Business Influencer magazine, which is really interesting, and it's now sold internationally. And you also host the Business Influencer podcast, which I'm hoping I'm going to be there at some point, where he interviews leaders across business, politics, and technology. So Ninder works at the intersection of entrepreneurship, media, and tech, and you've built a community that spans music, business, and innovation. I mean, that on its own, that opening is huge. So we're expecting a lot of this podcast. But rather than me telling you about it, I'm going to pass it over to Ninder. Ninder, if you can give us a bit of a background, and if you remember the flow that we followed last time, it's going to be something around your past, how it developed over time, where you are today, and then we'll look into the future. Up to you, Ninder.
Well, firstly, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I admire what you're doing. I think the new paradigm that we have, where we've got to look at tech as an enabler and a creator of wealth. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. I always, when I talk to somebody in technology, I describe myself as someone who was the first victim of technology. So being a victim means you then understand the power of technology to change lives and change society and change the world. So whilst I was a victim, I can, as I said, now espouse and tell people, listen, this is fantastic. Make use of it. Make yourself use the facilities to innovate, create new wealth. And so how was I a victim? Well, I was running a relatively successful record company. So we were signing artists and we were selling CDs, vinyls. In fact, I have one here.
Blast from the past, CDs.
So we used to sell these, and of course they do. I tell you what's also making a resurgence is the music cassette.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. The only thing I think we may never see again, you never know, is the CD.
The actual CD,
Yeah, but if you ask kids now, they don't know what any of these formats are. But anyway, we were selling tons of them around the world, and then of course this came along.
Oh,
the
yes.
mobile phone. And what technology allowed people to do was firstly through illegal downloading through Napster. There was a business called Napster. And everybody was able to download for free. Illegally, but they were able to do it. So what people at Napster was doing was taking a CD, transferring it into a digital format, and then just saying to people, listen to it for free. So what we found overnight, Roger, was that our market was rapidly disappearing. Nobody was buying cassettes, CDs, and LPs because they could listen for free. So I, like the rest of the music industry, we became ostriches in the sand. We couldn't see this world changing. We just ignored it. And my advice now to anybody who's in business is don't concentrate on the way your industry is changing, but look at the way other industries are changing. Because if you look at other industries changing, whatever's happening in there may come back to haunt you.
Okay.
So always don't stay focused in your own. Look at other industries. Look at the best players in other industries and see what they're doing and see the threats that they have and the opportunities they have and how you could maybe use some of them.
That's interesting. Well, it does feel then that you're just widening your scope, and then you have so many things to be looking at. So how do you stay focused? How do you pick the thing that matter?
Okay, well, I'll come to that. So I call it environmental scanning. So you scan the environment all the time. Now, had I done that, I and the rest of the music industry could have forecasted or understood what the implications of Napster were. And had we understood properly consumer behavior, we would have known suing people in court was never going to work. You can't take the entire global population on. And guess what, Roger? We lost.
You actually
We
went
lost.
with someone.
Yeah, so all the four majors who had the money, they took the 88-year-old aunt who discovered the wonders of the internet for the first time. So the spotty teenager who couldn't afford, they tried to sue everyone.
Yeah.
And they lost. And they lost. And at that point, that's I and other music people, we had our COVID. That was our COVID, because our entire business model came to a stop.
Yeah.
You know, in COVID, people had to shut down hotels. They couldn't take on airports, airlines couldn't go. Everybody's business models just came to a shuddering halt.
Yeah.
I
I like the parallelism, because when you're talking about COVID, there were businesses that were using the physicality of their existence for their day-to-day running. In your environment, that same impact was the fact that you were able to distribute your music physically, and suddenly that doesn't happen anymore. The whole market shifted.
So what happened was, as less and less people went to retail, our price, HMV, less demand for CDs. So therefore, those people who were manufacturing CDs, cassettes, they started to go out of business. The wholesalers who would then take my CDs and cassettes, suddenly they had no demand. They were going out of business. So retail started to go out of business. Manufacturers started to go out of business. Wholesalers started to go out of business. And record companies who were responsible for marketing and producing these records suddenly didn't have a market to sell to.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't get the product to manufacture. And even if we could manufacture, we had no one to sell it to. And we had no one to sell it through, if that makes sense.
The whole chain.
The whole chain collapsed. So I and the rest of the industries, it was just turmoil. Now, I said to you just a few minutes ago, you should look at other industries. Now,
yes.
We all know what a CD looks like, don't we?
Well, most of us.
Well, a CD is very similar to a DVD.
Yeah.
So those people who are selling DVDs should have realized that they were next.
Yeah.
So people like Blockbuster should have realized, and for those who don't know, Blockbuster used to sell and rent DVDs. So what they should have known was, oh, hold on, this is disrupting the music industry. The film and video industry could be next.
Yeah.
And those other people who were selling physical products in other industries should have said, like Amazon realized and like Netflix realized, well, hold on, this could affect our future, the way we sell products.
Yeah.
So if you look at other sectors and other industries, you can learn from them and you can anticipate and accordingly change your behavior in recognition of what might happen. So if we take Tesla for an example, now most people thought Tesla wouldn't get anywhere with these electric vehicles.
Yep.
But look, we're all changing into potentially in the long term all driving electric vehicles.
Yep.
And people who drive taxis. So if you're driving a taxi today, you're going to say to yourself, if there are autonomous cars in the future, is there a job for me? For those people who check in people at an airport, they'll be self-checking with cameras and robots. Is there a role for me? And for those people who work in customer service, answering phone calls, and it becomes autonomous and automatic, is there a role for me? So these people who are now currently employed, their employers are already thinking about this because they're seeing other industries doing that.
Yeah.
So that's my first piece of advice. I was a speaker at a Lloyds Bank event, and I turned to the audience and I said, don't concentrate on your own industry, because the threat might come from another industry who then imposes their disciplines onto yours.
That is a great insight into how you could prepare yourself. And sometimes it might be hard to see because most people get the fisheye. You're seeing through a peak hole. you do what you do because you've always done it. The small changes in the industry, you just adopt them as they come. But when there's a big disruption coming, like you said, maybe it's possible to determine that is coming because a parallel industry that's similar to yours is already doing it. You see it happening there, it's likely it's going to spill over to you. But at the same time, it's interesting now, because the more podcasts I do, the more interviews I speak with industry leaders, I do start seeing like the different takes, the different views on the same subject. Because this past, present, and future discussion that we're having, there's always some kind of twist in that timeline. There's always some kind of change, whether positive or negative. And the way people have interacted with it, they present it in a slightly different way, but they're all saying the same thing, that maybe you can predict what's about to happen just by keeping your awareness of your own industry open.
So Raj, I'll give you an example. So I was chairing, and this is interesting, I was chairing a panel, and we had about 200 in the audience, and there were 3 people on the panel that I was chairing. I turned to the third person who was running an e-commerce website or e-commerce operation.
Okay.
So I said, what are you doing here? Because your interface is with the end consumer. They're not in here. The end consumers, not. So what brings you here? Because all you're interested in is looking at the process and what I call disintermediation, removing some of the bits so you make it easier for the flow of activity. So all you're doing is engineering. You're engineering a process to make it smaller and shorter for the people. It was in accommodation for the people who want to book accommodation. Yeah, they just need to, you don't need to talk to them. He said, this was very interesting. He said, I'm in this room because somewhere in this room will be sitting someone who's going to put me out of business.
Okay.
In this room, somebody will come up with a better process than I have and will put me out of business.
And he wasn't just doing market research, he was doing market research prediction. He was seeing what's the future going to bring out my door.
And he said, somebody in this room might teach me something that I don't know about. Somebody in this room might say something that I can think, that's a great idea, and I go away. Someone in this room I might identify as a future competitor or as someone who could put me out of business. In other words, they could disrupt me. So it's my job, he said, as the head of the business, to disrupt myself.
See it,
in other words,
implement it.
Come up with something that forces me to bankrupt that and move on to something else before someone else does it.
Yes, because then you're leading that change rather than the change being implemented upon you.
Correct. And that was all by external scanning, by being out of the office and understanding what's going on around you. And I always say that, and I will move on when I come to my events. And one of the reasons I put on the events is entrepreneurship's a lonely place. So it's good for entrepreneurs to meet each other. But equally, that same room is where you understand how the world moves and changes. And because in the room, you've got people who don't look like you, who don't work in the same industry as you or the same sector as you, you're likely to learn from those people than people who look like you, speak like you, dress like you, and work in the same industry, because you can't see what's coming from afar.
Can't see beyond it. You're in your own little bubble of replicating personas.
And you're all just repeating what each other's doing. So you won't see it. You won't see it coming. And when it comes, as it did for us, oh my God, we didn't know how to cope.
You're either ready or you're not. That's what happens then. So
it's not even ready. It's preparing for that time. It's preparing, being preparation, being recognition. And I'll tell you, the only reason we didn't completely fold, because remember in COVID, our events business was people to people. We couldn't, the reason we didn't melt is because we'd already had our COVID in 2007.
You were already lean and mean. You were already performing in that capacity.
Not only that, we were ready for that mindset. That's the important thing. Most people's minds weren't ready for this big disruption called the pandemic.
Yeah.
And people just didn't know what to do. We'd already had that. We've been through that process. So we weren't as irrational as some other people because we've been through it.
Yeah, the denial was already dead. There wasn't an expectation of things will recover. There was, what can we do now to
Correct.
tackle this? Yeah, interesting. So you went from obviously the music industry, and that had its COVID. It had this disrupting of industry happening to it. And then what did you do right after that? How did you develop? How did you recover or pivoted to the things that you did right before the actual COVID?
Okay, so I think one of the other things I would say to people is every now and then ask yourself, if you weren't in this business, what business would you like to be in? What are the things long term would you like to do that you do not have the time to do now? Keep a list of all of those things. Always keep visiting them. So what happens is when you get hit by a major strategic shift, suddenly you're not having to start panicking. You pull that list out because you've already done the considerations, and then you say, out of those list of things, we always wanted to do this, 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 and this. Actually, let's do it now.
Maybe there's an opportunity there. Maybe you're ready to receive it.
Correct. And whereas in the past, so in other words, if you've never thought of that and never put yourself through that process, and you're under extreme stress, you're probably not going to come out with the best solution. Some might, but you'll come out with panic-driven, stress-driven initiatives that later on may not make sense. But if you've already drawn up a list, so what we did through COVID was that we'd always wanted to publish a magazine. We always thought when the time was right, wouldn't it be great when somebody finishes one of our events, as they walk out, we give them a really nice polished magazine for them to read. We'd always thought of doing that. So when COVID came, we brought that list out and we said, do you remember all these things we wanted to do? You see that one? The magazine, which we thought we didn't have the time, didn't have the skill set, didn't have the finance, and didn't have the capacity. Well, actually, we have all four now. We have the time. There's nothing else to do. We have the capacity. There is honestly nothing else to do. The finance is in place, and the timing sounds good. And why was the timing good? Because we built a community around the country through our events, and we didn't know how now to engage with them. So, Roger, if I rang you, I'd say, Roger, how are things? You'd say, things are great. And then you would say to me, well, how are things with you? And I would say, well, actually, we're not doing anything. But I could now say, well, Roger, yeah, we're just preparing our next issue of the magazine. There's some great articles in there. Actually, do you have anything sensible to say that we could include?
Yeah, of course.
So we got engagement. It gave us contact for social media. It gave us a physical product we could send out to people. So people subscribed, other people who've been supporters of us through sponsorship and tables, we sent them a complimentary copy. So when a magazine suddenly pops up in your letterbox and then you open it up and there's the advert for a future event and our brand's on there, what you're doing every 2 months, but you're reminding them you're still around.
Yeah.
So it was a great communication tool. It was a great branding tool. And it was a great way of staying connected. But equally, we made some money from selling adverts and from selling the magazine. Okay.
Well, that's interesting because for most people, when COVID hit and when people were no longer able to be physical with items or locations and interacting with people, everything started migrating to digital.
Yeah.
Somewhat like you did the exact opposite, and that was the right decision for where your business was at that time.
Correct. So what we did some very quick research, and what we found, so it wasn't a completely irrational move. So what we found was sales of books had been going up, sales of magazines had been going up, and now that people were stranded at home,
they had the time.
They had the time to read it. And if as long as it was a well-produced, well-executed piece of content, they would read it. And secondly, what we're now discovering, and I hope I'm right, is that people will spend so much time on a electronic device before actually they want to hold something
physical.
Yeah, because after a while the eyes get bleary and the whole thing starts to look the same. But actually, that's the reason why books have still kept going. Books have started to continue selling. And that's why we still do very well with our magazine. Because actually, there's a segment of the audience that wants something non-digital.
I was having a discussion with, obviously, we've had discussions with many creative brands and video creators, and one of them has a magazine that they send out. And we were talking about how books have kept around, and we're talking about the magazine specific, especially when it comes to a brand in the creative sector. And we're saying that having a digital copy is there for accessibility, something that makes it easy for people to jump on and read when they have a purpose to it. But sending out a physical copy that's printed on nice paper and you receive it in the post, it almost gives it weight. It gives it the reality of it. It brings that brand up compared to the equivalent one that's only digital, because it's real. And the fact that you have it on the side of your table, it's almost like you've got free advertising space of your brand on the desk of every person that receives it, and they see it again and again. It's the reason why it still exists, because it works. It works. It's got a value to it.
So there you go. So and again, when you asked the question earlier about why did we pivot from music to events, is that, and I think I've hinted it, is that I found when I was on my 10-year journey trying to sell Asian dance music into the world, global music, it was a lonely place. And we did it in the end. We sold 15 million copies.
Wow.
And number 5 in the UK charts, 9 number ones. We sold in America. Jay-Z jumped on the record. And we went number 7 in America. So we did well, but obviously when Napster came along, we had a bloody warehouse full of CDs, cassettes and vinyls, and we had to shift. And I realized I hadn't kept abreast of technology as I should have.
What do you mean?
Now I sit on the WM5G board, which deals with technology. And I sit on that board because I love to enjoy and I love understanding how technology is changing all our lives. So the shift to events really was bringing entrepreneurs together so they could celebrate entrepreneurs, celebrate wealth creation, network with other people so it's no longer a lonely place. But thirdly, you always learn from the person sitting next to you, particularly if they're from a different industry, as I said earlier, and speak a different language and have a different way of doing business. You will always learn from them. Always.
Interacting with people, transfer of information. It's amazing, especially with the, like I was saying before, I saw this with the podcast. Initially it was just an outreach to the world, get some branding out there, have interesting discussions. But every time I speak to someone new, I always have this learnings from the previous videos just coming through naturally. And that happening on mass scale, that's exactly what you did with your community. So what happened next? Let's say COVID happened, everyone was starting to come out of it. How did that develop your business?
So obviously what that allowed us to do, so we had 2 strategic decisions. One was, do we go back to the events, which we did, and there's a demand for them. But then we accelerated. So we now moved into Manchester, London, Birmingham, Leicester, Wolverhampton. But actually we then set up a couple of new summits. One was called the Midlands Economic Summit. So that was bringing business leaders together. So the other events, the signature events, are around entrepreneurship. But the Midlands Economic Summit was more around big stuff like infrastructure, skills, technology. So in other words, how does a region understand its place on the global market? So that's thinking more of as a region than as an individual or a business. And because of the victim of technology, I knew that still we hadn't got to grips as a business community understanding the future of tech. I remember forecasting, predicting what the business model might look like. And because of my experiences of having been on the wrong side of tech, I thought, let's do a technology summit, a tech transformation summit, where we bring the best brains in technology, and we spend a day understanding its impact on the individual, its impact on business, and its impact on society.
Yeah.
And how do we understand each year, how does that world change? So last year was this year rather, was the first time we did the Tech Transformation Summit. So after COVID, we understood there was even a greater need to learn, to understand the impact of changing regulation, changing global marketplace, and the role of tech. And you know something, to survive in today's business climate environment, you need to understand all of this, and you can't hide yourself away and think you're going to get. So we are, I suppose, a convener of knowledge sharing, of celebration, and of wealth creation.
Amazing. Okay. So that is where you are today. That's the mission. That's the vision of all the outreach that you do within the community, the events, the magazine, the reflection of why you do what you do. But from today now, of where you are positioned and the opportunities you might be seeing for the future, or maybe some dangers you might be seeing for the future, let's say for the next 3 years or the next 5 years, what's our life going to look like then? And how would you position yourself in order to be able to better respond to that?
Okay, so a couple of things. What you're now talking about is risk management. How do you manage the risks to your business going forward? I think the first risk until this Wednesday was, what was the budget going to look like?
It's here.
Yeah, the budget has now come. And the second risk attached to the budget was, how will people react in terms of their investment plans? Now, you're going to ask me, well, what's that got to do with you? What's that got to do with you? Well, if we're convening events and putting events on together for people to meet, they've got to feel the need that they want to meet. They want to be motivated to meet. And secondly, it's not like petrol, which you need to put in your car to go. You could say, well, I'll give this event a miss, because actually the economy is slowing down. So how the economy performs has an impact on my business. How entrepreneurs and business leaders react to the economy has an impact on my business. Because if you think about luxury brands, it's a discretionary spend. And anybody who's in training and leadership training and knowledge sharing and events, it's a discretionary spend. So for me, how the market, how the economy is operating, remember, external to me. So I've got to keep an eye on what's happening external to me. Then secondly, you ask yourself, right, internally, where are the risks? We talked about the use of technology. Now, we want to use technology so that when people come onto our events, it's a much more seamless exercise. They know what's going on, using social media to promote the brand. I think the risk to me and every other brand out there, irrespective of sector, how do you stay relevant, and how do you make sure that people still think you're relevant? And that's where now brand positioning becomes important.
Yeah.
So the risk to every company is, where is your brand currently in the marketplace? And you must always remember about your brand, because that reflects everything you do. So risk always is keeping an eye on the strength of your brand. Keep an eye on it, because if you don't, you could disappear. Now, you've only got to think of Yahoo. Remember what happened to Yahoo? Big brand, do you remember? BlackBerry, big brand. So these brands come and go. So how you interact, how your brand interacts with the world is very important. I think thirdly, in this ever-changing world, you need to stay ahead of the risks. So one of the things we've maintained, and now this sounds strange, but we've maintained that we're going to use technology, but we're going to use it in a way that still leaves us as a premium brand. Now you must say, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that we want to make sure that not everything is automated. We want to leave a gap between automation and personal service.
Okay.
If we can have a space where our clients know they can pick up the phone and talk to someone, we think that adds to our brand.
Yes.
In other words, make sure not everything is 100% automated, because there are going to be times where the consumer, whoever that consumer is, needs to be comfortable that if there's an issue needs resolving, they can actually ring someone. Now, I know a lot of brands out there where actually there's no telephone number, there's no email address, and they have you circulating on their systems.
Yeah.
And that leaves, and I don't care which brand it is, that leaves a pretty bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
And your perception of the brand will start to come down. So I think it's very careful. You've got to be very careful how your brand is perceived. So one of the things we definitely concentrate on is personal service, personal communication, and personal availability. Even on the day of the events, there's a certain level of automation beyond which they still should be able to turn to a human being and say, I have an issue.
It's almost like you need to find the balance between optimizing for the sake of efficiency and being personable with the service that you're providing. No one likes to feel like they're not important, and being thrown into an automation loop straight away. You don't want to do that. No one wants to do that.
And Roger, the stats show it. So most, not all, most CEOs of the biggest brands have a larger following than the brand.
Yeah, it does happen that way. Why do you think that is?
I can tell you why that is. So even though I run the natural events and signature awards, I will always have a bigger following, simply because people like to follow people. They don't like to follow institutions. They prefer to follow people. People buy from people. If the people in an organization aren't the right people, you will stop buying. It is all about people. It always has been about people. It always will be about people.
And that's also interesting when it comes to the reflection of my industry or my type of business. So for us, it's more about tech innovation and how to go and get investment before you can build something that's very IP intensive. You need to build the intellectual property. You need to build the actual software and the technology to go and sell eventually, which means that there's a lot of upfront investment that needs to happen into it. And then from there, whenever you speak to an investor, whenever you do a pitch, whenever you suggest to someone that they need to trust in what you're trying to do, my very first investor came in and said, that sounds very interesting, but I'm investing because of you. Because I can see your vision, I can see your passion. I know that if I support you, then whatever you end up doing will be successful. Not because it's the idea that's going to change the world, but because the team that's going to make it happen, if they do hit a wall, if they do find a problem, their passion, their enthusiasm, their ingenuity will go past it. And that's why it's really important to have that pitch slide that says, who are we? What have we done before? What are we doing today? Why are we doing what we're doing? And vision, mission, it all comes down to people. And if you take that away, then you take away the spark. You take away the importance of why these things can be important.
It's what we said earlier, is the environment can change. Your products might end up changing, but you as people should be able to adapt to that and change your product profile or your product positioning or your product makeup to match an ever-changing market. So you're absolutely right. So it's balance is the right word. For some organizations, full automation is best. So if I see it sometimes when you try and buy tickets for airlines, and I bought one recently on a train, and I bought a ticket about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I waited all day for the ticket to come through. It didn't.
Okay.
And then at 11 o'clock at night, I bought another one. And as that one came through, the first ticket then came through. Now suddenly I had two tickets at the same time. So then I had to, when I went to the station, I said, I got two tickets. They then gave me a phone number to ring. The phone number took me to a switch. A switch then turned into, and I was there half an hour. And I thought, is this worth my £100 ticket? Is this really? And I had them running around, had them running around. Eventually, I got the right email. I sent the email, and about 3 days later, but you know something, I'm exhausted from just remembering what I had to do.
The time you spent.
Now, had the person at the station said, here's your money back, my impression of that brand would have been totally different to what I think of them now.
Yes. Sometimes automation makes it worse.
So you need to find that balance, and again, it's back down to brand. If you get into a lift and you talk to someone and you walk out, did they have a positive image of your brand or not? And that will determine the future of your business. Your brand is everything.
And you are your brand.
you are one of the custodians of the brand, as is everybody else who works for it. And if all you do is force people down a loop and they buy stuff they don't want to buy and then they got to return it simply because there's no one to answer the phone. Again, it depends on your product, but that will determine the strength of your brand. It's knowing how to use technology properly.
How many times have you heard of these stories of from millionaire, successful, wealthy person that goes down to nothing, either because it's real or because they put themselves there to see if they can build up their wealth again? And so many times it gets proven that as a person and as the person that you are, regardless of the situation you're in, if you are stripped of your tools, your toys, your wealth, and get put in a difficult situation, the way you respond to it is down to you. So it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you build yourself and your team and your brand and your capabilities, then you will react to each one of those situations better than someone who hasn't. And that's why successful people are successful, not because they're already successful, but because they are who they are.
Correct. So I think it's, you learn as you go along. And I think being adaptive is important. I think understanding the role of technology is important. Understanding the role of other businesses is important. Understanding the role of government is important. And understanding the role of global business is important. And I think the successful entrepreneur is the one who can capture all of that and continues to learn on a daily basis through meeting people, through watching and listening to podcasts, reading the right material. The more educated they are in terms of what's going on in the world, the better they are equipped for tomorrow's challenge.
So would that be your leaving remark for this podcast? That you need to keep developing yourself. You need to interact with what's out there. You need to keep your eyes open. You need to build yourself up with knowledge.
I can guarantee if you don't do that, your business will be finished.
There's no driver. You're out. Amazing.
Yeah. Game over.
Thank you very much, Ninder, for giving us all this insight. In how many years would you say of industry experience of living this stuff have you had?
Well, if you accept that 1990 was when I set the record company up as a sole trader, that gives you an idea.
30 odd years.
Let me leave you with one final comment, Roger. Sorry, yeah. I don't want to take too long. I think the other thing I would say to people is try to get experience of other sectors outside of your sector. So what I did a lot during those 30 years, I've been a board member of many boards which have nothing to do with my industry.
Okay. And why did you do that?
Because I did that because I had one specific objective, is when I walked in that room, remember, it's not about my business. When I walked in that room, I learned from other people on how their sectors were going. I also learned about how my local economy was operating and my regional economy. And through that, not only do you understand how the world is working, how your regional economy is working, but you are able to influence, but more importantly, you're able to put something back to your local economy, whether it's a charity, whether it's a regional board, economic board. But you've got to stay engaged with the people outside of your sector. And the more rounded you can get, the more understanding you can, the greater your influence. And believe it or not, the greater your personal brand grows. And with it, you take your business.
I would argue on that about the rounded person. You know the saying of what is it? The trade master of one trade. What is it? Master of many trades. How does it go?
Yeah, it's that you don't master one trade, but you have an understanding of everything. And yes. Now let me also add this to you, Roger. Now, people say to me, what should education do? Because, Roger, tomorrow there are jobs that you and I don't even know about. We have no idea.
Yeah.
Back in 2007, when Facebook, when jobs came out, there was no such thing as what we're doing now. There's no such thing. There was no social media, no social media agencies. Advertising companies were totally different. There's no digital marketing. There's no such thing as influencers. None of this existed at all. In 2007, these jobs did not exist. We don't even know what the jobs are going to be of the future. So the question then is, how does education react to that? I'm now going to pick up what you said. So what education should be doing is not giving us specialists, because the problem with specialists is if something changes, they're out of work. They're out of work. There's nothing for them to do. So what we should be producing are people who are creative and can be adaptive. They can change and move and learn new skills. So they're able to then in the future, this is back to your thing about being a master of none, being a master of all, is you've got to be able to adapt and change to what the environment gives you.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I've remembered it as well.
Yeah, and so remember we spoke about potentially 10 years. Will we have taxi drivers? Will we have truck drivers? Will we have airline pilots? I don't know. But what are the jobs of tomorrow? And if someone comes sitting in front of you and you know they're adaptive and they can do lots of different jobs, you'll take them on.
There it is. Jack of all trades is a master of none.
Correct.
Still better than just the master of one. That's what it is. You need to be rounded.
You need to be rounded. You need to be creative. You need to be adaptive, and you need to be able to change and do things you couldn't do yesterday. Because now, there are some jobs that will never change. Plumbers, electricians, construction workers, absolutely. But if you said, I for the rest of my life, I want to be X, be careful. That X job might not be there and you're not ready to do anything.
How does the education react to that? Because people go and get university degrees, they get so specialized in a specific field. They go out into the industry. By the time they're out into the industry, that field's changed, and it changes so fast these days. Correct.
That's my argument. So my argument is we need to produce a different type of person that when they leave, they're of a sufficient. So example, I'll give you an idea. So only 3 years ago, they said we need people who can code. Everybody was saying we need coders. AI came out, and now they're saying, well, actually, AI can do the coding. We don't need coders.
We need people that can make AIs that can do the coding for us now.
Because AI can learn from you, and I was saying to a lawyer friend of mine, and I said, when a contract comes in now, before I engage with you, I'll get AI to work it all out, read the whole thing, check all the clauses. I then put back in, this is what I want. He then goes back and changes it. And I said, the only time I need you now, Mr. Lawyer, is before I sign it. I want you to just check it. But I don't want you to construct the contract, because actually it's already done. Now, I had a company who said, we will go through your database, and over time, our AI will start to learn on how I communicate through emails.
Okay.
It will start to mimic
your tone of voice, your response.
Yeah, so instead of me replying, I can go and do something else. And this AI will reach out to all my contacts, start engaging with them, start replying to them, and start doing deals. Now, Roger, imagine one of those people is you.
Yep.
So an AI company comes to you and says, Roger, listen, you go and do what you want. We will manage all your emails. We understand how you reply. We know what you're interested in. So, Roger, my bot, let's call him a bot, engages with your bot. The two bots do the deal, and neither you and I will have ever met.
Is that the downfall of the internet, is it? Is when everyone steps away and the internet just eats itself into a result that no one knows what it's going to be.
Well, this is my point. So my point is a brand is run by people. And do people, now, and I'm probably making a mistake, but I don't have a PA because I prefer people to ring me direct and then talk to me direct. And that way I know I'm speaking to everyone. At some point, that's going to become impossible. But it is all about people. And that's today what I've been talking about today. It's all about people equals brand. Brand equals
what the title of your podcast is going to be. It's all about people.
Yeah. People equals brand. Brand equals success. and success is what drives you forward. And I think as long as we're all sensible enough, and you use the word balance, as long as we're sensible enough to have a balance to everything, we'll do okay.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ninder. It's been very insightful, and I'm sure we'll do it face to face at some point as well.
I'm sure we will.
When you're ready, invite me over to your podcast, and we'll make sure it's not just an hour. We'll do a very long one.
That's fine. Cheers, Roger.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.